unpacking, which was the purpose of showing you this today. We really want teachers to think about, how can I grow as an adult learner? How can I think about the work that I will be using, the information that I will be using, and how can I prepare myself for the upcoming school year? And one way that we are encouraging you to prepare yourself is to get very familiar with the structure of a construct progression, the three components: understandings that happen in the head, skills that occur by what students make, do, say, or write. They are observable behaviors. And then once you gather that information, then you have performance descriptions that will help support you in being able to make generative decisions and comparative decisions about what your observations were in your classroom to make a sound judgment of where you're finding that student functioning on the progression. So many of you yesterday asked about questions related to the electronic platform. And once the evidence is collected within the course of your instructional day in an embedded nature, the electronic platform will be available to serve as an online means of storing these evidences. Multiple pieces of evidence, whether it's anecdotal notes, that was mentioned yesterday, whether it's a quick 1-minute video that you take with your iPad, or student work samples, all of these pieces will be invaluable to paint a picture of that child. Lauren mentioned, I think in the first day when we were providing the overview, of the child profile. And this child profile is sort of depicted here in this graphic because you're going to take multiple pieces of evidence across the course of that 60-day window to support an understanding of where that child falls developmentally so that those skill sets can be assessed and you can be consistent as the classroom teacher with your understanding of being able to determine that learning status on the progression. So if you think about a standards-based instructional setting, a student who is working from a developmental skill set in the latter stages of a construct progression, then the theory is that more often than not, students would have a greater chance of meeting the expectations of the defined kindergarten standards. And in actuality, standards are written in alignment to what we would refer to as a typically developing 5 or 6-year-old. Therefore, when teachers elicit evidence, that may indicate that a child is functioning at an earlier stage of development, and he or she would need a little more scaffolding in their learning to close that gap between learning and development. Know, with this information in hand, teachers will be able to more appropriately close the gap. Throughout that 60-day window, the teachers will be able to show the growth over time, and when support is needed beyond that 60 days, they will have the flexibility and the opportunity to continue the use of the construct progressions to help them in planning and in instruction. So, when we refer to the platform as the assessment, we really want to send the message that the platform is not the it. It's not the assessment. The platform is a support tool for collecting evidence. So if you think about this shift to 21st century teaching and learning, yesterday, someone mentioned in the chat box that they currently had a process in place, and it may look like very similar to what you see on the screen. Sticky notes, some way to house in a folder of some nature, some anecdotal notes, some information about children. Well, if you think about the technology platform, what we really want you to be able to think about using this platform as is a time saver. When you have technology at your fingertips and you have the information about the construct progressions, then taking videos or audio recordings or pictures with the iPad or putting some written documentation in, then that easy upload will help to support this housing of this information so that when you gather information from multiple sources, like in the screen before, it would be like a snapshot. You can take a picture of any of these situations, family contributions. You can make some anecdotal notes even and take a picture of that if you need to. If you want to take a quick 1-minute video, I don't know if you have seen some of the videos that are posted on the Live Binder, but oftentimes what the teacher is taking a video of is actually just the child's manipulation, maybe use of the hands. The child's face may not even be in the actual view of the recording, but these ongoing observations, tasks that you currently have in place in your classroom, peer and self-assessments that children do over time, something that you as a teacher has created to gather information about your student, your published instruments, your work that you're doing with early literacy in your M class, that would certainly be a component that you would be able to gather to help you make that decision of where children are on the developmental continuums so that within that 60-day window of time you can determine that learning status. So let's think about, well, how does it look in that normal school day? Let's pretend. Think about language development and communication. Yesterday we talked about the 5 domains of learning and development, and we talked about opportunities to observe. At the opening days, whether it's that getting to know you phase, whether it's staggered entry, I bet you're sitting here reading some of these thinking, I do that already. When you're observing students following directions, you as a teacher may say to your students, get your backpack and stand in line. Get your lunchbox and stand in line. Maybe with book orientation and print awareness, those getting to know you time frames by which you're allowing students opportunities to explore some books. Maybe there's a basket on the table when they enter the classroom, and you're learning about how they're holding those books. How are they turning the pages in a very natural way? Health and physical development. Teachers oftentimes will use morning meeting time to sing songs or have group movement activities during transitions. When you're having this occur in your classroom and you have a sound understanding of the progression as it relates to motor development, it gives you an opportunity to observe on the run. To think about how students are crossing that midline. How are they using their bodies? Opportunities when children work independently and they use writing utensils, or they're painting, or they're cutting. Thinking about those areas in regards to the whole child and in regards to the health and physical domain, it gives a teacher an opportunity to gather that information to support that learning status determination. Yesterday we talked about approaches to learning. Let's think about that. As you engage in opportunities to allow students in your classroom to make choices, then you're able to think about what interests them. And when they make those choices, as a teacher, thinking about, are they able to stay engaged? Do I provide, as a teacher, opportunities to build upon the cognitive domain? Object counting being one that you will embed in this process of North Carolina KEA in the upcoming school year. Are there opportunities at the opening days of school, that first week of school, where you provide objects for students to count? Even possibly outside of math instruction. Are they counting objects during snack? How about crayons in a box? Oftentimes when we ask children to clean up from something that they have created, and we know that we may want to gather more information, an opportunity may be to say, Lauren, could you put your crayons back in your box for me? And while you're doing that, would you count for me to see how many crayons you have? Social and emotional development, thinking about emotional literacy, thinking about children in those early days of school. How do they feel? Can they tell you why they're crying? Can they tell you how they feel about coming to kindergarten? And how about, do they notice things about other children, their peers, about how they're responding to kindergarten or experiences that are new to them? These are great ways to gather information in all domains without the rigorous, set, intentional mix of having to do that when teaching is core and strong. Kindergarten teachers truly spend a great deal of time getting to know their students. This is an experience that many of them are not accustomed to, and kindergarten students would be very intrigued by teachers who would ask questions, want to know about them, want to gather information about them. And as a parent, I feel very strongly by saying that when a kindergarten teacher approaches a parent and asks questions about how your child feels about coming to school or how your children may respond to certain elements of what would occur during the school day, would be very beneficial. My screen is jumping again. So what we want to really send the message for you to think about, teachers, is that we want you to think about preparing for this new school year by not thinking about adding to your plate, but thinking about business as usual and intentionally looking for or naturally observing elements that would help support the 5 domains of learning and development. So when your lesson plans are designed, thinking about within the course of that week, within the course of that day, within the course of that morning meeting, what might I need to be intentional about as it relates to my students to gather information to help me as a teacher inform my instruction to support the whole child. As we think about selecting those students that we're observing, as we think about selecting specific learning targets for our students, we know that when we intentionally look for opportunities to learn more about our students, it will help us as teachers be able to think about developing a criteria so they can be successful as individual learners. And by taking that information and capturing it and uploading it or somehow housing it in an opportunity later to be able to interpret that evidence, whether it's individual or whether it's with a group of colleagues, we hope that you'll then be able to think about the orange section of the formative assessment process in terms of adapting and responding to that interpretation. So we're going to pretend one more time. We're going to pretend that it's day 12 of kindergarten. And you, as a kindergarten teacher, have worked closely with your colleagues to develop a lesson that relates to KCC.4 in the fact that children will understand the relationship between numbers and quantities and connect counting to cardinality. And you have decided as a group of kindergarten teachers that you will use the book, the Cheerio Counting Book. You have Cheerios for manipulatives. You have taken the opportunity to plan for this whole group lesson where you're reading the Cheerios book, you're engaging the students in opportunities to count the number of Cheerios that are printed on the pages that you are reading to the students. And then your plan would be that you would allow them an opportunity to then be able to count independently or in a group setting. And so if you can imagine your little kindergarten students sitting in your classroom and you have given them each just a little ball of Play-Doh or clay and a raw spaghetti noodle. And they're going to take that spaghetti noodle and they're going to stick it upright in that ball of clay, and they're going to count how many Cheerios they have by placing them one by one on the spaghetti noodle. When you think about that lesson design, there are multiple opportunities for a teacher to observe. There are multiple opportunities for a teacher to observe not only the object counting, but during the reading of the Cheerio book, possibly even seeing that there is book orientation and print awareness opportunities. I'm going to let you take just a moment and read the example that's listed on the screen. And if you would, just think about from the object counting perspective, an opportunity, and I would like for you to think about whether this is a natural fit for something that occurs in your classroom every day, or would this be something that would be unnatural for you to see when you're working with your students in a whole group setting, reading a book, or even in a small group. Talk about that in your groups. Okay, let's move to the next one. So maybe my intentions were to get a little more information as the classroom teacher on Lamont. And as Lamont is working with his 5 Cheerios and his spaghetti noodle, I noticed that Lamont is working very hard to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then if you'll notice, Miss Simmons removes the Cheerios off the noodle and places the Cheerios back in the container and asks him how many he had now. Lamont, without counting them, smiles and says, "There's still 5, watch." Lamont takes the Cheerios out of the container one by one and says, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He touches one Cheerio every time he says a number. Lamont says, "See, there are 5. This example, this scenario, can very well be an interaction that a teacher can document, whether it's with a snapshot, whether it's with a little video, or an anecdotal note. And this can be used as the teacher gathers information to determine where Lamont is on the object counting progression. So ultimately, providing opportunities during the learning process of engaging in an understanding of object counting progression, the book orientation and print awareness progression, and the other constructs that are relevant to the other domains of learning and development, we encourage you as teachers to provide yourselves structures to collaborate and analyze this data. Teachers are going to need support. And they're going to need support in understanding the construct progressions, collecting that data, embedding it into instruction, having opportunities to analyze it, and then over time, implementing all of those components of the formative assessment process will ultimately provide you as a teacher an opportunity to gain more knowledge about your students. Our screen's jumping again, but we're going to go back and just think about, and we encourage you to think about establishing that classroom culture that supports the K-3 formative assessment process and how you can provide these opportunities to gather information and work with your colleagues and peers to think about having conversations to determine where children fall on the developmental continuums. Communication is key. Professional development is key. And when you feel as though you need that technical assistance support, we encourage you to reach out to your peers. We reach out to your colleagues. Reach out to your leaders. Building a community of learners can be done in a variety of ways. We're using the process of a GoToMeeting today to build learning opportunities for you all. And ultimately, providing support for yourself will help you to be able to focus and self-reflect and be able to determine your learning needs as you engage in this process of learning new information. We encourage you to make those connections to current practices, business as usual. What am I already doing during the first few days of school? What is provided in my pacing guide and curriculum documents that will allow for me opportunities to think about where I can be more careful in my observations of child development. We encourage you to plan ahead. We encourage you to take the opportunities to peruse the live binder, to unpack those construct progressions and use the additional resources that are provided. We have the North Carolina K-3 Formative Assessment Wiki available. There is a YouTube video that is really helpful in understanding school culture and teachers working collaboratively together. It was a U.S. education debut of a video. And then, of course, the Live Binder has multiple resources to support you. Your involvement matters to us. That's why we're doing this series of GoToMeetings today. Teachers are the key. And the more comfortable, the more confident that you as teachers are in this process, the better you will be able to move forward and grow from these experiences. We encourage you to learn from one another. We're going to take these final moments to really give you some time to reflect. We have used this same process in the previous meetings that we've had, whereby we have allowed opportunities for you all to type in any questions that you may have in the chat box. Before we go into that, I want to say that, and my screen's jumping again, I want to say thanks for hanging with me. I know you could tell that I'm a little baffled by this, and I'm sure I'm not providing you the quality presentation that you deserve today. We have a lot of technical issues. I apologize greatly. I will share this information and know that these slides are available in a more systematic, intentional opportunity for you to go back and look at that I did with 2 other regional consultants. I just feel terrible about today and how things unfolded in terms of the technology and the fact that it has thrown me for such a loop that I don't feel like I've provided you the quality that you deserve. But I do want to still take the opportunity to allow for questions, comments, concerns at this time. And if you would just type those into the chat bar, and let's just try to follow suit with what we've done with the last 2 meetings. And we will all hope that our following meeting will definitely be much better than this one today. If there is a slide that I can go back to and clarify any information about, please feel free to just sort of jog my memory on whatever it was that you may have some other questions about in relationship to anything we've covered. That would be helpful to others as well. So there's a question about materials for use for some of the assessments like the ones I've talked about today. I do want to share 2 resources. The first I want to share is on the Live Binder, and it is the Construct Progressions tab, the green tab. And there is information about publications. There are blue books that have been